Hello children, today I'm going to take lesson number 10 from your political science book. The name of the lesson is Law and Social Justice. From the tiniest of seeds to the biggest of machine, everything goes in the hands of both the buyers and the sellers. Every product that you buy from the market goes through a chain of people. Many people are either directly or indirectly involved in this buying and selling. Market everywhere tend to be exploitative of people, whether as workers or consumers or producers. That is, in every process of marketing, of buying and selling, each of the person involved in the buying and selling undergoes certain kind of exploitation. Much of our work is demanded at a very low cost. To protect people from such exploitation, the government has made certain laws. These laws try to ensure that the unfair practices are kept at a minimum in the markets. Nobody tries to make profit at the cost of loss for others. Let us take a common market situation where the law is very important. Here we are going to take an example of a worker's wages. Private companies, contractors, business persons normally are interested to make huge profits. In the desire of making more and more profit, they end up denying the rights of the workers. Either the workers are not paid their salaries or wages at a proper time, or whatever the wages are paid, it's very low. In addition to that, they are demanded more work and even asked to work at odd times. Our law tells that it is illegal and very wrong to say no to the wages of a worker. Similarly, to ensure that workers are not paid less in comparison to the work, there is a system of minimum wages which are set for each employer. The minimum wages are revised upwards every few years. So the government tells us that each employer must settle down for a minimum wage. These are the basic wages which every employee or a worker has to get from an employer. It is not that the government has made the minimum wages law only to protect workers. There are also other laws that protect the interests of both the producers and consumers in the market. This helps us in the smooth functioning of the relation between the three parties of the worker, the consumer, and the producer. But just making laws is not enough. The government has to ensure that these laws are implemented, followed by the employer. Enforcement of law is more important in order to protect the weak from the strong. For example, in order to find out whether the Minimum Wages Act is properly followed by the employer, the government has to regularly inspect working sites and punish those who violate or break the law. When workers are poor or powerless, the fear of losing future earnings often forces them to accept low wages. Employers know this very well and use their power to pay workers less than what should be given to them. In such cases, it is very important that the laws are brought into force. By making laws, bringing them before society, and also seeing to it that these laws are not broken, the government can control the activities of individuals and also the private companies so that justice is given to the poor workers. Many of these laws have their basis in the fundamental rights guaranteed by the Indian Constitution. For example, the right against exploitation is one of the fundamental rights, and it says that no one can be forced to work for low wages or under bondage. Similarly, the Constitution lays down that no child below the age of 14 years shall be employed to work in any factory or mines or engage in any other dangerous dangerous employment. Here is a case study which happened in our country. It is the world's most worst industrial tragedy that took place in Bhopal some years ago. Union Carbide, an American company, had a factory in the city of Bhopal. It produced pesticides. At midnight on December 2nd, 1984, a poisonous gas called methyl isocyanate, in short called as MIC, started leaking from this Union Carbide plant. By 12:30 a.m. on December 3, the poisonous gas clouds surrounded the sky. While hundreds and thousands were affected, the municipal workers claimed that they had cleared at least 15,000 dead bodies in the immediate surrounding of the plant. The death toll reached around 3,589 persons by 1989. Thousands of people who survived still suffer from chronic illness, vision ailments like blindness, impaired immune system, and increased incidence of cancer. The government represented the victims in a civil case and demanded $3 billion as compensation in 1985, but accepted $470 million in 1989. Survivors went to the Supreme Court, but Supreme Court decided that the settlement amount would stand. If we try to understand the events one by one as to why this Bhopal gas tragedy happened in India, we have to ask ourselves, why did American Union Carbide factory set up its plant in India? One reason why most of the foreign companies come to India is because of the cheap labor which is available. People here are ready to work at minimum or very low wages because of the huge unemployment. Wages that the companies pay to workers in America are far higher than what they have to pay to workers in poorer or developing countries like India. For lower pay, companies can get work from workers for longer hours. Additional expenses such as giving workers housing facilities are much less in India. Thus, companies can save costs and earn higher profits. Private companies, in order to reduce the cost of the product, also take another step. This is called the cutting down of the cost of production. This cutting down of cost can be done by other more dangerous means. For example, if a company cuts down its safety measures, it is able to save in the cost of production. In the Union Carbide plant, every safety device was either not functioning or was in very short supply. Between 1980 and 1984, the working group for the MIC plant was cut in half from 12 workers to 6 workers. The period of safety training for workers was also brought down. Earlier, they were given 6 months of safety training, but now it was brought to 15 days. If we compare the American countries at West Virginia, America, and the Union Carbide plant in India, we'll come to know a lot of systems which were followed in America but not in India. Number 1. At West Virginia, computerized warning and monitoring systems were in place, whereas in the Union Carbide plant in Bhopal, the alarm system was done only manually and people depended on human sensors to detect gas leaks. Number 2. At West Virginia plant, emergency exit was placed in the factory itself, but in the factory at Bhopal, there was no emergency exit. Now the question arises as to why are there such sharp differences in safety standards across countries? And even after the disaster happened, why was the compensation to the victims given so low? One part of the answer lies in what is understood as the worth of an Indian worker. Since workers are available in plenty and one worker can easily replace another because of the huge unemployment, there are many workers who are willing to work in unsafe conditions in return for a wage. Making use of the workers' ignorance, employers ignore safety in workplaces. Thus, even so many years after the Bhopal gas tragedy, there are regular reports of accidents in construction sites, mines, or factories due to the careless attitude of the employers. As the government is the one who is responsible for making law and bringing the law into practice, it is also the responsibility of the government to see that safety laws are also brought into practice and implemented. It is also the duty of the government to see to it that the right to life guaranteed under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution is not violated. As the safety laws practiced in India are not very strict, so accidents keep on happening. Government officials refuse to recognize the Union Carbide plant as a dangerous plant and allowed it to come up in a populated locality. When some municipal officials in Bhopal objected that the installation of MIC production unit in 1978 was a safety violation, the position of the government was that the state needs continued investment of the Bhopal plant, which provides jobs. So, the focus of the government was in providing jobs to a number of people rather than providing safety to everyone. It was unthinkable, according to them, to ask Union Carbide to shift to cleaner technology or use safer procedures. Government inspectors continued to approve the procedures in the plant even when repeated incidents of leaks from the plant made it obvious to everybody that things were seriously wrong in the factory. This is quite opposite from the part of the government as a lawmaking and law enforcement body. Instead of protecting the interests of the people, their safety was being disregarded both by the government and by the private companies. With more industries now being set up both by local and foreign businesses in India, there is a great need for stronger laws protecting the rights and safety of workers. In 1984, there were very few laws protecting the environment in our country, and there were hardly any strict enforcement of these laws. The environment was treated as a free entity, and any industry could pollute the air and water without any restriction. Whether it was our rivers, air, groundwater, the environment was being polluted and the health of people was getting disregarded. The Union Carbide factory not only reduced its cost of production by following lower safety standards, but also did not spend any money to clean up the pollution caused by the factory. Whereas in the USA, any such plant had to pay a huge amount of money for the clearance of the pollution caused by it. The Bhopal gas tragedy brought the issue of environment to the forefront. Several thousands of people who were not associated with the factory in any way were greatly affected because of the poisonous gases leaked from the plant in the environment. This made people realize that the existing laws, though weak, only covered the individual worker who were working in the factory, but not the persons who lived near those factories. These people got indirectly affected because of the leak in the carbide factory. Due to the pressure from environmental activists and others in the years following the Bhopal gas tragedy, the Indian government introduced new laws on the environment. So, hereafter, the polluter was to be held accountable for the damages he is doing to the environment. The environment is something that people over generations will share, and it could not be destroyed merely for industrial development. The courts also gave a number of judgments upholding the right to a healthy environment as intrinsic and very important to the fundamental right to life. The government is responsible for setting up laws and procedures that can check pollution, clean rivers, and introduce heavy fines for those who pollute the environment. In recent years, while the courts have come out with strong orders on environmental issues, these have sometimes affected people's livelihood adversely. For example, the courts directed industries in residential areas in Delhi to close down or shift the industries to a place which is out of the city. Several of these industries were polluting the neighborhood, and the discharge from these industries were polluting the river Yamuna because they had been set up without following the rules. But while the court's action solved one problem, it created another. Because of the closure of the factories in the city, many workers lost their jobs. Others were forced to go to faraway places where these factories were relocated. And the same problem now began to come up in those areas, for now those places became polluted because of the discharge of the factories, and the issue of the safety conditions of workers remained unsolved. Recent research on environmental issues in India has highlighted the fact that the growing concern for the environment among the middle classes is often at the expense of the poor. The challenge is to look for solutions where everyone can benefit from a clean environment. One way this can be done is gradually move to cleaner technologies and processes in factories. This will ensure that the workers' livelihoods are protected and both workers and communities living around the factories enjoy a safe environment. Private companies, contractors, business persons, in order to make higher profits, resort to unfair practices such as paying workers very low wages, employing children for work, ignoring the working condition of the people, ignoring the damage to the environment, so on and so forth. A major role of the government is to control the activities of private companies by enforcing and upholding laws. Laws that are weak and poorly enforced can cause serious harm, such as the Bhopal gas tragedy. While it is the major responsibility of the government to see to the safety of the people and the environment, people also can pressurize the private companies and the government to work for the interests of the society. In this chapter, we found that the facility of healthy environment should be extended to all. Similarly, people must demand stronger laws protecting workers' interests so that right to life is guaranteed for all. Children, with that I conclude the lesson. I hope you've enjoyed the lesson.